How can you do all that needs done in life and still pursue your desire to learn French or the guitar or grow a plant or make art? You can't put a fiddle under your pillow and wake up playing it, though how cool would that be? But one thing we can do, no matter how chaotic and overwhelming life can be, is know that every tiny small motion in the direction of those endeavors really do matter. And not only that, they add up over time with great momentum. Join me, Fain, as I interview painters and gardeners, designers and musicians, photographers and cooks, creative livers of any kind, who have somehow, in the middle of it all, continued on their creative paths, no matter what. This is Fain House Radio, and I'm so glad you're here.
Well, I'm Hannah Burnworth. I am an artist behind Milk House Studio, and so I am both an art teacher and independent creator and make my own work and sell my own work. Gosh, I feel like I've had a lot of creative endeavors in my life. As a kiddo, I did a lot of friendship bracelet making. Neither one of my parents were really particularly into the visual arts, so I had to make some experiences for myself. But I kind of feel like everything I did was creative. Like whenever I would have a school project, I would turn it into some kind of little movie or a little film or a little collage or a little painting. Or I'd beg my teacher, oh, instead of writing a paper, do you think I could do a painting about this? So I feel like I always had that. And my maternal grandparents were Amish. And so grandmother stitched and quilted and things like that. She didn't do it extensively necessarily, but just kind of had those things in her home. And so I would go over there and hang out with her, and she would have me do crafty things. And I would cut apart her seed catalogs and make collages with all the flowers in her seed catalogs. And I felt like I excelled in my art classes in school. I had a lot of great art teachers, and ended up studying and got my BA in art ed and then my MAE, Masters of Art Education. I really kind of took the education route too, because it's been a really good bouncing off of each other kind of career.
You have grandparents that were Amish, which means you have a parent who, did they grow up that way and decide to leave?
My grandparents left the church during Rumspringa when they were teenagers. So my mom grew up conservative Mennonite. There are all these divisions German Baptist and conservative Mennonite. But so she grew up wearing a covering and a dress all the time. But they could drive. My grandfather owned a feed mill, so they owned business and were pretty progressive, I think, inside their community. But yeah, I had a lot of cousins and my best friend's dad had grown up Amish, and so all of her cousins. Been to a few Amish field parties in my life.
So you're talking about the handwork was a part of things, and spending that time with your grandmother. Did your parents also do some of that, or was it sort of we don't want to make things because that's
Yeah. So my mom kind of swore off farm life. I never had any pets growing up because she had so many pets and animals she had to feed. She sewed a little bit when I was younger. She made some of my outfits and stuff, but just kind of she was a teacher too. So as I got older, she stopped sewing, and she's a great cook. She wouldn't say so, but she also kind of really didn't love cooking because they made everything from scratch and off the land. And I think she enjoyed her childhood, but she kind of went the opposite way, where she didn't want to continue all of those things because they were like homesteaders and did everything themselves. And so I'm a lot more interested in that than my mom, who came from that. Yeah,
I've noticed that sometimes it'll skip a generation that way, where a grandparent, a way one of our parents grew up, and then they push against it, and then the kids come back to the grandparents and be wow, that is so cool.
I would say that's definitely happened as I've kind of gotten older. And my segue was more, I was kind of into contemporary craft and how people are making commentary through craft. But then over time, I think I just got into the processes. And I mean, I told you I'm a wannabe like Appalachian woman, like that hardworking, like salt of the earth person. That appeals to something in me. And I didn't even grow up there, but just like all the cultures that came through the area, and just a lot of that background. I'm now fascinated with that as an adult, and yeah, pushing back on like oh my gosh, I'm always working and I'm always running and I'm
So this slower life is appealing to you.
It is.
To add to your list of talents, whether you know it or not, I've witnessed you sing, and you're a good singer, and you should keep that in mind. Keep that in your back pocket for.
Yeah, I do love to sing. It's so funny that I sang when I was there. I literally sing a lot in the car, in the shower, but I never sing in front of people, not since like high school choir. So it was really fun to sing and, like belt it out. And
why would you say you're compelled to make?
I honestly can't fully answer that question. I think it's something so kind of deep inside me that it's hard to even completely get in touch with until I'm just doing it. As a kid, I felt confident most of the time, but I never felt like I was great at doing something. Like my ego was never really like internally stroked by anything I did. I was a swimmer and I was a runner and I was a good friend to people. I had my stint with roller skating and all of these different things that I tried. But I think there's something inside of me that feels really good when I'm making. There's like this internal ego that I just want for myself. It's not even an ego that has to be for other people. It makes me feel good about myself, and it makes me feel like it's just a really good version of me and something that I'm doing that is like really worthwhile and pulls the joy out of the inside of me, I guess. So I feel like it's just this untouched part of me that I can never explain really with words. So I don't know. I don't, that's just there. I guess that's just there. And the older I get and the more that I make, that part is fed and it becomes like a bigger and bigger part of me. I think it was just like a little seed, and now it's like, I don't know. I don't know how you feel as you age, but I just feel more and more comfortable in who I am. Whatever that space is, that space of growth, that's kind of like the space that art shares inside of me. So it's really very much for me. And I like to share it, and I like to sell work and help support the family in that way. And I like to learn, and I like to display it and have people say nice things. But when it all comes back to it, I'm really just sitting there making things for myself. So
it sounds like it's like a deep down natural essence of you or something.
I think it is. Yeah.
Did you have a teacher or a mentor in your childhood or later that really helped encourage you? Because it's not an easy path.
No. Well, my elementary art school teacher, I will never forget this. Like we painted 3 watercolor eggs, right? Just like looking at form, probably like in black and white or something. I don't have them. I wish I had them because this was my first piece of work that was displayed publicly. That was like a real moment. Like, whoa, I loved doing this when I did it. And then other people could see that. And I remember that. He was a great teacher. I had a couple of good teachers through K through 12. I had one really influential professor, Jason Knapp, whose work was absolutely incredible. And he rarely ever showed it or did anything with it because I think he just had that same kind of personal drive. And even just like coming and taking class with a teacher like you, that was awesome. And there are a lot of artists that I love to look at that kind of feel like mentors, even if I don't know them personally. There's a lot of contemporary women artists that I love to look at how they're kind of marketing and hitting the world and just how they are becoming more comfortable in themselves.
Do you remember anything any of those people said to you that made you feel good or made you feel encouraged?
I don't know who said this. It was something I read on the Instagram of one of these artists, but and I take this into my classroom a lot, but it was a quote about perfectionism and beauty are not the same thing. I don't know if like you've worked with a lot of makers that are just learning and they get so stuck and like there's the fear of moving ahead because you don't want to ruin something or you don't want it to turn out differently than what's in your mind's eye, or you don't want to rely on your intuition because it might lead you astray. I can't remember. It might have been like Ashley Longshore. I don't know. It was one of the artists that I follow that put that statement out there. And I think about it. I think I've thought about it like every day since. It's like perfection and beauty aren't the same thing. The farther you get from perfectionism, the more beautiful like things get or something like that.
I love that. And I think it's true. I think it's definitely true.
Yeah, I do too. I let that guide me a lot as an educator.
This is connected to what you're talking about, how I think I read, and I think it's called Art and Fear. Have you heard of that book?
Yeah, I've read little excerpts. Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't remember the authors, but it's a great book. Everyone should check it out. He talked, or their co-authors wrote about how a class was tested. They got their grade on one amazing piece. And then the other group got a grade on quantity. And the quality of art that came out of quantity, like just producing a lot, not one piece, was so much higher, so much higher. And it takes so much pressure off that one perfectness versus cranking it out. And you are really good at cranking it out. I could tell when we were in class last week. At first I was like, oh no, she's my student, but she's a teacher and I already love her work so much. And that was a fun dynamic because you were also such a good student. Sometimes when people are teachers, they start to like double ask or try to show what they know too, and then of course we're like, of course we all know things, and you dove into some projects that I know were like a little simple compared to what you've done before, but then you added all your own stuff into it. But the main thing I could tell from years of teaching, mostly I teach adults and kids, but mostly adults, is they are hesitant a lot and they don't kind of truck along or they aren't sure. It's like our brains get in our way, and that feeling of perfection gets in our way. Do you feel like for yourself when you're like working and thinking, I felt like I would look over and you're like, click, you were in the zone. And then you click out of it and click in again. And that's something I try to do in my studio. As an artist, teacher person, I can't wait for inspiration. This is how I make my living. I don't wait for that. So there's a discipline to it. So you walk in and you got to go and you got to do. And I think of it like a muscle, almost like a singing muscle, the more you do it. So what is that like for you in process? Because you have such a busy life. Like, do you just go in and just click the switch and that took years to practice that? Or is it natural to you?
Yes, it is really natural now. It did take practice. I made somewhat similarly to that as a student because I didn't have any distractions. When I started teaching the first, I would say 3 to 5 years of teaching, I didn't make a single piece besides when I was demoing for students because I was so overwhelmed with teaching practice and, being a public school teacher, being a high school teacher, some of those kids you're just a day ahead of them as far as trying to give them any new kind of thought or information. Not that I can't learn from them too, but then there was an emptiness, I think, obviously, when something as important as making for me wasn't there. I felt that. And I slowly started to create again. And then actually, when I got pregnant with my first child, I had a really weird, motivational moment where I kind of went back into creating, realized that I really loved paperwork the most. And I was dabbling in lots of different things and kind of streamlined because I knew I would have less time. And I started thinking about things that way, like how to multitask and how to do things during my school day. Cause I just knew now I'm not going to have as much time. I had no idea to the extent that it was going to happen, but there was a shift in my practice there, definitely. I think through time and experience and kind of planning for that and knowing that, keeping a space that can be messy and I keep a table in my classroom, kind of over by my desk and a cabinet that's always organized, ready to go. With my next project I want to work on, before I leave school, I put my stuff on top of the piles that I want to work on the next day. I kind of organize it and make myself a little goal in my head, just very loose. And then I've got that ready for the next day. so that if I can work 20 minutes during my prep, great. Or if I have 10 minutes each class period because students are already working, that's great. I also think as a teacher, what you do for students is constantly help them problem solve. So you're constantly looking at pieces all the time. You could do this, you could do this, you could do this, both formally and conceptually. I'm thinking of ideas for 130 people all day. So when you do that, like you condition that part of your brain to just be ready to go when you have to have ideas. And so I've learned, like, the first couple ideas that pop into my head, go. I could sit here and try to think of ideas for the next 30 minutes, but then I'm going to get less work done, right? So because I'm constantly in that mode anyways, I've had so many ideas fly through my brain, and like some of them latched on already just through my students, that when I sit down to make, I can just go. I think working with others, in community with others, and bouncing ideas off of others just keeps that muscle going all the time.
That is such a good example of folding it into your daily life no matter what. Mm-hmm. I interviewed someone named Jim Pankey, and he's now a professional banjo player. But for years, he was a banker and he wanted to be a musician so badly. And he would take a ukulele and have it behind his desk, like at the bank, and then just play. And that's what you're saying. It's almost audacious to be like, in honor of yourself, I'm going to have a workspace right here where I'm working. Mm-hmm. And then you have your own art table in your art class. Think how many hours you've kind of harvested through the years for your art. And also you actively art making is an investment in you as your quality as an art teacher.
And then my students watch me do that as well. And a lot of them follow me, on Instagram or whatever. And so a lot of them are like, ooh, I'm creating my own accounts. I'm creating my own aesthetic. Like before they even get to like an AP course or an advanced placement course, or even if they're never going to go study formally, they see like the value in it. It's something that I love. It's something that I do every day. It's something that I can make some income from, and they're really into that. And my upper level students, I always make a portfolio like with them when they have to do their big portfolio for AP, for advanced placement classes, and they will really critique me, and their critiques are great because we know each other and we're in the same space with each other, and they see how I work, and they've seen how I work for 4 years, because I'm the only art teacher at our little rural high school. It is cool. And as a parent too, I'm sure you experience that. Sometimes you feel, I feel like, oh, should I do this in my classroom? Over time, it's proven again and again that they're actually learning more from me having that, or me saying, hold on, it's going to be 1 minute till I get there. I'm holding this glue down, or, they get it. And same with my kids. I want them to see somebody who didn't like set all of their dreams aside just to be a parent, I think that's a really tough not to do that. I mean, because there are times when we make major sacrifice, but I want them to see like, this is something I really believe in. This is something I really love. Creativity and connecting and living a creative life is really important to me. And as much as I love you, that's something I'm not willing to put aside. And I think it's a good example for kids too.
Well, definitely. I mean, you have kids of so many ages around you, and they're seeing you make it a priority, which helps them know that's okay. It's not something to wrap guilt around. There's a tendency to feel like guilty or selfish to take that time. And it's not, it's really not. We were talking about what Eric Maisel wrote in one of his books about one of the things that can get in the way of producing is falling in love with the anticipation of making versus actually making. I think that can easily happen. People will be in their day job. They're dreaming and imagining all day of going home and working, in their studio. And then they get home and they're like, Netflix, it helps like make the day more interesting to daydream about this amazing art you're going to make. But it's very different to cross the threshold.
Yeah, it sucks when you're cutting out like your 100th little tiny piece of paper and you have like glue on your hands and, oh, that part didn't work out. And now you have to scrap it. And yeah, like it's romanticized when you see the final piece hanging on the wall, or you walk into the final installation in a museum, or, you get to sit in somebody's chair that's already beautiful and comfortable and sanded. That's great, but yeah, that's not the process.
I feel like you're so good at like working and reworking and reworking. There are even masterpieces where the x-rays show all the previous versions that were behind. And of course, things like, social media stuff can really make us really think, oh, they just blinked their eyes and poof, there it appeared.
I will rework something till it fails and then rework it again till it fails. And I mean, I will just like layer and beat a piece to death, It's because I want to challenge myself to make it work, but also I think that's a fascinating process and it mimics life. Who's really good at this? Nobody's good at this. Life is so many beautiful moments, but it's hard. And if you don't spend your time consciously trying to make it better and trying to make it better and trying to make it better and trying to learn, it could really end up like just a big pile of shit. I mean, I don't want that to happen. I want to keep learning something and making it better. Because the romanticize, like I'm going to bust out this beautiful painting every once in a while, like that moment when it'll happen, something will come together so easily. And you're like, whoa, but that's so rare.
And that's why it boils down to, are you willing to be engaged in the process or not? And that's what marks a maker or not, even if it's not for a profession, even if it's for just picking one recipe you want to cook because you're curious about the cooking and the doing versus dreaming of the cakes you'll make or whatever.
Right.
I was going to ask, what do you do when you're stuck? But I feel like you've kind of worked yourself. You've learned through time how to not get stuck. Mm-hmm. What would you say to people as a word of advice for if they are stuck?
Well, firstly, to have that space, even if it's a small space, just some kind of space that's organized, well organized, that feels good to you. Even if it's one little desk, if it's one little corner of your dining room table that's yours, whatever, that little space with your favorite tools that's organized and comfortable, where you can look at a couple pieces you've been doing or hang them up beside you and just have sort of your next goal based on those kind of visually mapped out. I think having that space keeps people from getting stuck. I also think, being in relationship with people you can talk to when you get stuck is really good. And then maybe something a little more concrete. This is also something I do. I have like a little plastic bag of papers. It like has this little zip at the top. And I'll just take that with me just wherever I go. Sometimes it's really full. Sometimes it's not as full. But for me, I think the material that we're drawn to also will guide us. So, for me, I love paper. And so if I just reach into there and I find a little scrap, maybe it's ripped off of something else I have, maybe it already has stitches on it, maybe it's a cool color, then that piece will actually guide me. Like, it'll be like, ooh, this looks like whatever, half of a flower pot. I'm going to, or like, this reminds me of water or whatever. But I think if you go to the material, and maybe that's more of a thing for makers who have made for a little while, but I think different materials will start like calling to you. And if you go to that, like you'll find something in it.
I like those thoughts so much. I do that. I have like a binder and it has the see-through sleeves, plastic sleeves. And I'm always collecting images, color combinations. And if I'm stuck on a painting, I'll just flip through it. And every time something happens. So it's like, there are those tools to have around us that will like make you think of a thing.
And some people, like for you, I don't know how you keep sketchbooks and stuff, but for me, my sketchbook is more of a collection, like collections of little pieces of paper. That's kind of how I think of my sketchbooks. Because of the way I work in these small increments of time, and because I work so intuitively, I don't often sit down and really sketch something out. More often than not, it's just a quick collection of like, ooh, I like that piece, or I drew this real quick, I'm going to tape it in there, or I saw this painting I like, here's a postcard of it, I'm going to tape it in there, just like a collection like that. If you feel like that's more of your style of keeping a sketchbook, I think that's.
How would you describe your teaching philosophy, and what do you notice really gets young people hooked on art?
Well, I think all of our egos are big because we're people, we're human beings, and we forget often that there are other people around us, but especially when you're 14 to 18, your ego and yourself is everything. And that's okay. That's when you're trying to figure out what your place is. So I think any project that allows a student choice and to like reflect on who they are is going to immediately catch them. Also, I think, especially like with beginning level high school classes, the permission to fail. I always tell them right away, like, you do every project in here, even if they look like the biggest heap of trash you ever could have imagined, you're walking out of here with an A because you did them all. Let's just decide on that now so that you don't have to, because a lot of students who are good students are very scared to take a subjective class. When I first taught, I would write these extensive rubrics because I always felt like I had to justify to students. Those just fell by the wayside after. I was like, this is me filling out papers that mean nothing. No, we're going to make and we're going to talk and I'm going to be in their space and we're going to be trying things and we're going to be experimental. So I think, giving them the freedom to just be themselves and finding out, like taking interest in them, finding out who they are through those pieces and establishing a relationship, you can get students to do almost anything for you if they like you. And it feels a lot better to have a relationship and be liked by a student than when someone's 14 through 18, they're skeptical. So I just think finding out who they are and giving them the freedom to be that person through their artwork, it just feels so revolutionary to them. There's a lot of great things about Indiana public schools. I don't want to poo-poo things too much because I've given my life to that and I do my voting and all of that. But standardized testing, it really puts a damper on the ability for kids to come up with multiple solutions, to be a problem solver, to extrapolate like their own meanings from an assignment. I feel like I have a lot of responsibility on my shoulders because I'm one of the only spaces in the school that encourages that. So
they're really, really lucky to have you. Like you're saying, the reason why that ego's there in that age time also means that there's a sensitivity that they have and that the adults around them can have huge impact, also negative impact, but hopefully positive. I know when I was in that age range, I had some adults around me who really treated me like they were so happy to be around me. They were so happy to talk to me and I was a real person they liked to be around and like listen to. And it really shaped me in a huge way. I think it's so important. Do you feel like having a day job takes pressure off of your art making, or is there part of you that dreams of doing only production art? It's a hard one because on one hand, I think for a lot of, they'll talk about somebody gets a sabbatical and they're going to write that book and then they have so much time, they do nothing. And that if you have that 10 and 20 minutes, you might be producing a lot more over time. Of course, having kids kind of puts that on us, but it could be anything. It could be somebody caring for a partner or a elder, or, there are a lot of things that pull us in different directions.
I'm torn because I do romanticize the life of just creating for me, having a studio space outside of my classroom. I romanticize that. I picture this really organized space where I have all the framing stuff there and my mat cutter there and all my shipping stuff there and all these little compartments. And I can just do it all from one spot and not carry things back and forth, where I can just take my 1 or 2 days a week to just market, and the other 3 to make. I have made these business plans, these goals. I've slowly worked like the last 8 years to make a little bit more income from my art each year. And I map that actually pretty carefully because I don't want to become the burnout teacher who isn't super into it. I still feel that that's me, but I've watched many teachers around me who were excellent. It's just one too many people. It's one too many years. It's a human condition. It's a hard job to keep doing and doing. So I always like to keep that on my back burner. But right now, the reality is showing me that I create a lot more during the school year than I do in the summer, which is when I have more time. I think that some of that like romantic time in the studio where I'm making tons of sales all the time is like probably not really accurate. Still worth I think working towards someday maybe. But yeah, I mean, when I have my own time, then we like go to the zoo and we sit outside and we have a stock tank pool and we get in the stock tank pool and we go to Target and we walk around and we go hiking and we go on vacations and all of our money's gone and all of our time's gone. And then I'm like, oh, I'm way off track here. I don't know. I'm that person who can shut off. And when I don't have a job and it is fun time, I can really sink into that. Just like I can sink into that really directed work mode, I can also sink into like, hey, this is my day off, man. I know a lot of artists get this like heavy anxiety when they're not working towards something. And I don't know what happened to me, but a few years ago, that just went away. I think I just got too busy that when I finally did have a day, it was so great. And so I can also sink into that. So in the summer, I get pretty, like I might not change for several days, my clothes. I mean, I get a little too carefree, I guess. So.
Well, that is such a healthy balance though, in terms of the work hard, play hard, kind of thing. Like you're saying, it is hard to turn that off sometimes. And then if you don't have financial pressure on your art, you might be able to relax even more on those days because things are covered. I've definitely had friends who they're like, I know I want a day job so that financial pressure is not on my art. But I think that's great that you also know how to relax and hang out with your kids. I love your description of your day. And then we walk and then we have ice cream.
Yeah. And it's really fun.
Yeah. You've got 2 small boys. We actually have boys that are the same age. That's pretty fun. And you're really good at this might be connected to like how you're good at just relaxing and taking a day off, is signing yourself up for classes and having your own personal enrichment and having artist retreats and meeting with your dear friend and taking classes together or, that kind of stuff. What does taking time for yourself like that do for you and your work? Because it's even up to a week sometimes that you go. That is so great. And I think it's hard to do that.
Yes. So when they were younger and I decided that I thought I was ready to take a little more time for myself, it was hard. Again, like anything else, it took some steps. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to jump into my 1-week classes again. I started off by doing, like a art date with a friend or other social things that made me happy and brought me joy, or going to, the theater. My first time that I was going to spend a whole week away, I was really anxious, and my husband was going to be here with the kids, and he's great at it, but does things differently than I do. And so I had to get through all of that. It wasn't easy. And then even like those first couple of years when I'd go to like one retreat a year, do something, I'd cry. Oh, I'd cry when I was packing my suitcase, and I'd cry when I was getting their clothes out ready for the week. And, so it wasn't easy. It wasn't just like, but I progressed through that. Now they're older, they're more independent. They have their own things. They have their own friends. I love getting away. I love them, but I love learning. I loved learning at your workshop a couple weeks ago, because again, a lot of the techniques you'd shown I had done before in some ways, but you had a new way. And I like to watch teachers teach. You're a true teacher. That was so inspiring to me. It's fun for me to get to know other people. All of those things. I mean, that's what fills me up. And I even took 8 of my high school students to Germany for 2.5 weeks in 2019. And I was gone for 2.5 weeks, which for me, that has been the longest stint that I've spent away from my kids. And I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? And I did it. It was fine. It was fine, because they need that time as well. They need that time with their dad. They need that time with their friends, and they need that time to be independent from me. They need a breather, just like I need a breather. I would just say to any mom out there, or anyone who's feeling like, how can I leave the responsibilities of life to go do this? Just do it. It gives you the best perspective. You miss all the right things, but at the same time, you learn, you grow.
I mean, it's just an example of filling yourself up so that you're all filled up for everyone around you, And then the other part of it is how it impacts your art, which is who you are. that's worth every dime. It's worth the hard part of organizing to go. And then once again, you know, the people around you are seeing you make that a priority, which gives them permission to make other things they love a priority too.
Mm-hmm.
What are some places that you would suggest to folks who might want to take themselves on an artist retreat?
Well, I feel like I'm just beginning this journey in life since I've only been doing it the last 3 or 4 years, really. But I have been to John C. Campbell Folk School, which, if you're listening, I'm sure that you know that Annie Fain is very affiliated with and keeps close to, and has family that's done many things there and taught many classes there. I love that place. I love the land that it's on. I love the feeling that I have when I'm there. I love the non-competitive, process-driven folk school vibe. I've also been to Aramont, which is more academic, a little more intensive, I think. I don't want to say not as holistic in the experience, because it is, but I felt with John C. Campbell, it was more about me being in the land and being in the place. Whereas with Aramont, it's a beautiful setting, but you're right there on like the strip of Gatlinburg. So you have to be willing to drive through a little crazy and like put up with a little crazy. But man, some of the teachers there that I've experienced are phenomenal also. So those are 2 places that I've gone. I'm also really excited. I'm going to do an artist mother residency in Paris, Tennessee at Stay Home Gallery in February for 1 week. And that's going to be very different for me because there's nobody teaching a class. It's just a space that's available for me to explore all day, every day. I mean, I can't wait. In a big studio space, and it's beautiful. And I have also been making a list of parent-friendly residencies because I kind of put that to the side thinking like I won't be able to do any of this until my kids graduate from high school, kind of. I have been following like Interlude residencies in New York. It's a residency for parents. There's another one I just wrote down in Colorado. Elsewhere Studios. I was just looking through, and like artists that I follow from Instagram will go to these residencies, and I'm like, oh, well, they have their kids with them, or they have their family with them, or not that I even always want my kids and family there, but you know, it gives more options. And I think this summer, so I have a friend, we met at Aramont, and then we went back and did another workshop together at Aramont, and then we did a workshop together at John C. Campbell. So we're like, where do we go this summer? And I would really like to try to go to Penland and do a 2-week class this summer at Penland.
What would you tell your maker self like 10 years ago that would help give her trust in the fact that all those little bits were going to come together to where you are now?
Oh boy, that's tough. What would I say? I think I would tell my 10-year
ago self.
Ago self. What do I say? I would probably encourage that person to make good relationships and contacts with people and keep taking every little opportunity, even if it didn't really totally make sense. Just to stay open.
Stay open and go for it.
Mm-hmm. It's what's worked for me. I mean, and don't get your feelings hurt too easily. Develop a little bit thicker skin in the maker world. Not that you can't take emotions into it, but find that inner reason why you're doing it. You know, you don't make it into all the shows, and you apply, and you don't get to teach at all the places that you apply. You know, you might try to get published, and they might say, we don't want this for our publication. And that has to happen like 10 times for every one time, you know?
I think it is Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic. She talks about how she started to collect rejection letters like trophies, because the higher quantity of rejection letter, that means you're getting closer and closer percentage wise to a yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. That's a great way to put it. So I think, yeah, that self as someone's kind of like starting out and getting their footing and making creative experiences, that makes you want to quit. For me, I never had a choice because I did it from this place from the inside. But I think it gets dangerous and so easy to like look through Instagram and be like, ooh, I like that. They're selling so many things. So I'm going to do that. And the minute you do that, okay, yeah, it's great to take some ideas from people and to collaborate and to think about those things and to get, you know, collect these visual resources and be inspired. But as soon as you take that inside of you and you try to make that person's inspiration, your inspiration, something's going to break. It's just not going to work. I tried that tons of times. I'm learn from my mistake. Like I'll be like, oh, well, maybe I should be doing more of this. And then never pans out.
It seems like also that critiques can be either harmful or good. Sometimes it's helpful. Like you need to get your darks and lights more contrasty, you know, something like that. But sometimes it can be really crushing and not accurate and kind of put you off your path when actually that's your style and that's your thing and you need time to develop that.
Absolutely. Do you follow like the Jealous Curator, Danielle Chrissa? She has a podcast and she had like a huge stint, like a 20-year stint. She didn't paint at all because she went to college for art and she had a professor just knock her down. And I forget all of the things that were told to her, and then, you know, she had to kind of come back to it on her own and kind of be a self-teacher. Just her story resonates with so many people. A lot of those people have that same story. But yeah, I do not criticize my students that way. Once they get into AP, we really talk about work that's strong and, you know, this could be done better and this could be done better. But, you know, and even students say, be harder on me, be harder on me. I'm like, you're doing plenty of that to yourself, you know. That doesn't feel good to any of us. If you could say, oh my gosh, yeah, I like the green one better. And I like this like patch of light. Maybe put a patch of light right here. That's great. But it feels terrible when somebody's like, that just, you know, like maybe for a hotel or a generic hotel, you know, you're like, oh. I remember one of them, like, man, geez.
And the thing is, so much of that is built on personal taste. Even with food, you'll have one person, I love that taste. And then the next person, I hate that taste. So the truth is in the middle with you. It's just not really.
Yeah. Everyone's truths are different when it comes to any of those sensory things and the frosting of life and all of that. It's so much about personal taste. So yeah, everyone's going to bring their own world and their own experiences into it. That's how it's supposed to be. And yeah, never going to make everyone love what you're making, and that's totally fine. And it's about what makes you feel good instead of everyone else. That's a really rocky game to play as a creator and a maker.
And I feel like the more we sink into that, the stronger our work gets, because our style is stronger and the sense of us is stronger and we enjoy it more. It just gets better that way. What's filling your inspiration cup these days?
So I'll share a small amount of personal information. My family has changed a lot since the third week of August, and without going into a lot of detail, I've been home alone most of the time with my boys. So mostly single mothering, and I have a full-time job and I am still making, and there is not a ton of time to fill my cup. So like everything else, I have to weave that in. I really look forward to my first cup of coffee in the mornings, but I have to make it at school. So I use the Keurig. So I like to drink French vanilla Dunkin' Donuts K-Cups. That gets me going. And then in the evening, I like to have a cup of peppermint tea and some cozy blankets on my couch. So like the thing that I drink or put in my body, like right when I wake up and right when I go to bed, I probably should be like a big glass of water or something, but that's a lie. It's my coffee and my tea. I like those quiet moments because I can just sit and like think for just a little bit. That brings me inspiration. Playing with my kids, even if I don't feel like playing with them often, once we get started with something, it is really fun and they're really funny, and their experiences kind of inspire a lot of my more playful and like stacking pieces where I layer like paper on top of paper. Sometimes I'll even cut apart what they've made or what my students have made and put that back in my work. So kind of their visual play and other play. My students' victories are keeping my cup full. I have a student who graduated last year. She is the first in her family to go to college. She is attending Columbia University in Chicago. She is going to leave with under $30,000 of debt because she has gotten so many scholarships, which the school is about $100,000 a year school. It's crazy. And her internships are crazy, and she's loving it. And she's thriving. And I get to live a little bit vicariously through her, all of her experiences in Chicago. I would prefer to live on the land, but I love to see like all of the things she's doing. Yeah, living like that through my students' successes is also really a cool thing. It makes you feel like, all right, like they're getting it. They get to have this cool experience. So that's filling me up for sure. And my making, and then nature, I mean, duh. Like when we went on that hike and we got to collect, leaves and trace the shadows of the leaves. And that heart's a bustin'. I'd never even seen those before. And they're like round and red and pink, and which I love red and pink, obviously, if you look at my work. And I don't know. Yeah, being in nature is just really the best.
It really is. On one hand, it's like in every artist's bio or artist statement you'll ever read.
It is.
On the other hand, it's so true.
Yeah. I know. Sometimes I think I could boil down like almost every bio to like human experience and experiences with nature and the land.
Do you have any last words of encouragement to anyone out there just trying so hard to like make and create in the middle of their crazy life?
Just keep going, man. Keep going. Yeah. Develop a little of that thicker skin, find out what really makes you happy, strive for, that balance of like branches and roots, where you take adventures, but then you also have your comfort, and you have adventures and you also have your comfort. I think that's really important. Find artists you love, find people you love. I don't know. Just keep going. That's all we got. The next day is going to come. So you might as well, make the best of it and spend your time learning and connecting.
Jump on that horse and ride.
That's right.
If you would like to be in touch or have someone you would love to hear interviewed, email me at afainhouse@gmail.com. I also hope that you're inspired to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. New episodes come out every other Tuesday. If you would like to watch these interviews in video form and are curious about the happenings of my little business called Fain House, where I paint and make art prints and gift cards from my watercolor originals, I'd love for you to sign up for my email list. When you do, you get a coupon for 10% off a one-time purchase in my Etsy shop and first dibs on my annual limited edition calendar printing. You will also be granted access to our free private Facebook group, which is the one spot you can watch these interviews. If this all sounds fun to you, go to your web browser and type bit.ly/Fainhouse to sign up. That's with a capital F and a capital H in Fain House. This is not a weekly newsletter, but rather a list of folks who are interested in hearing from me time to time. You can find this link, as well as links for each person I interview, in the show notes of each episode. I'm Annie Fain Barrelon. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll leave you with a quote for the day. Small steps, day after day, can change your entire reality. Emily